Good morning, Claire here from Cotswold Chickens again. Lovely weather. It's bashing down a gale here, as you can probably hear on the roof. Really nice, just what we want for July turning August. I want to talk to you today about feeding your chickens, what to feed them on, the feeders and drinkers and the equipment that you might need for that as well. Just thought about using this as a subject because I had somebody asking me the other day. It was a gentleman on one of my advanced courses, and he said to me, "Why aren't my chickens laying, Claire?" And I said, well, the usual questions: how old are they? When did you last worm them, and what did you worm them with? And then the last question, as always, is what are you feeding them on? And he said he was feeding them on marmite on toast for breakfast, and then they got mashed potato and spaghetti because they like it. And I said, well, there lies your problem. If you're not feeding them well, you're not going to get good eggs out of them. Your chickens won't be healthy. It's a bit like feeding your kids on chocolate mini rolls. They absolutely love them. They think they're great, and of course these chickens were loving the mashed potato and the spaghetti. They thought it was great fun, but it's not very good for them. And with kids as well, and probably makes them quite hyperactive, chocolate mini rolls all the time. But unless chickens get the right amount of nutrients, the right format, they're not healthy. They're not designed to, if you think about chickens in the wild, living in the woodland, what they're designed to eat is they're designed to eat things like seeds, berries, green stuff like grass and leaves and that sort of thing, and little bugs, all that sort of thing from the forest ground, from the grounds of the woodland. They're not designed to eat things like processed food that we're not supposed to eat too much processed food, are we? But processed food like salty stuff, anything that's been pre-prepared, too many glutinous grains, so lots of wheat and bread and stuff like that. Bread is definitely not good for them. So you have to bear that in mind when you're feeding them. The chicken feed that we can get these days, in the old days we used to mix up our feed by milling grains, but the chicken feed you can get these days is pre-prepared, and it comes in different types of formats. I'm just going to show you a few different formats so you can get an idea of what we have. Now, the most common one that people seem to feed are the chicken pellets here. Now, chicken pellets are little tiny pellets. They vary in size, but not dramatically, just so that they can be eaten by bantams or full-size hybrid hens. And those have all the nutrients ground into them and compressed into a pellet. The reason more people seem to feed pellets is because they're easier to feed, they're easier to measure out, they're not dusty. The chickens will get all the nutrients in a pellet rather than picking through powder, say, and getting all the little bits out and not perhaps getting as much of a balance of nutrients. They're also less messy in that chickens tend not to rake it out of the feeder onto the ground, so it's a little bit less messy and hence less smelly. The other format that's available in is the mash, the powdered mash, meal some people call it. It's a powder, as you can see, with lots of little grainy bits in there. Tends to be used more with a trough feeder or something like that because it's very easy for them to hoik it out all over the ground in the run. And of course, as you know, with grains and feed, if it gets wet, there's a health implication in that the mould that it produces, the mould that grains produce when they're wet, is very toxic as well. But you can see that there. Some people like to feed that. They just like the fact that it keeps the chickens busy picking all the bits out. So that's the main constituent of your chicken feed. They should be eating that like 98% of the day, and especially first thing in the morning when chickens get up and they come out of the coop. What they do is that they like to have breakfast like we do. So they like to eat a lot in the morning. They eat less through the middle of the day, and then they eat a bit more in the evening just before they go off to roost and go to bed. So you need to make sure that your feeders are well filled up in the morning so that they've got plenty of food to be eating. Do keep any treats that you're giving them to a minimum, and make sure that they're healthy treats. Now, there are lots of different things that you can give chickens, but as I said, keep it to a minimum and keep it towards the end of the day when they're eating less, so they're filled up on their pellets and their proper food and what they're supposed to be eating. So some of the sorts of treats they can be eating, there's one here called super mixed corn. It is literally maize, corn as we know it, sweet corn. There's some wheat in there, there's some little lentil bits, little pea things in there. Now that is very, very sweet and contains a lot of fat. So chickens love it. It's a bit like sort of chicken crack. I suppose it's like those, going back to those chocolate mini rolls. So chickens love it. They think it's really good. Now, consuming this is a bit like having a very hot curry or something, or a big meal before you go to bed. You feel really hot afterwards, so it helps them to generate a lot of heat. So a handful of this before they go into roost in the evenings in the winter is perhaps a good idea, but please don't give too much of it because it will encourage the chickens to build up a lot of fat. Now, chickens aren't like us. They don't put their fat layers on round the edges like we unfortunately do. They tend to accumulate it inside their skeleton. So what it does is it crowds out their essential organs and stops them from functioning so well. So they can't breathe so well because their lungs are constrained by all of that fat inside their abdomen. Their heart doesn't work so well. Everything doesn't work so well, and of course they'll stop laying. So you need to make sure that they're only getting a little bit of that towards the end of the day. Good treats that they can have foliage, so they need green stuff. So if they're free ranging around your garden, they will pick that up ordinarily. But if you've got dreadful weather like this when they're not going out in the garden, in the winter when there's less green in the garden, they'll be picking up less of that, and they do need a certain amount, like we need greens in our diet. They need a certain amount of green to keep them healthy. Now what I do is I use the outer leaves of cabbages, things like that, and string them up in the run. I string them up with a bit of baling twine just out of reach from the chickens, so that they had jumping up. It's quite a good game for them. They get a little bit of nutrients. Don't feed too much green stuff, it will give them diarrhoea. Things like that. Also, when I'm out walking, I tend to pull up some fat hen. It grows like a weed in the wild. We can eat it. It's slightly not bitter in taste, it's a little bit like rocket, and they love that. It's not called fat hen for no reason, because it's very nutritious. They really like it, and it's also related to things like red Orach and tree spinach, which are two very similar plants which you can grow in the garden because they're really ornamental and pretty, and grow them for your chickens. So they're healthy treats. Also, we've got these lovely mealworms here. Now, the mealworms are little critters. If you don't like feeding the live ones, they're a bit squeamish, these are good. They're like 47% protein, so obviously really healthy for the chickens. There's no rubbish in there, and they're nice treats. And mine, if I come out the back door and rattle one of these, they go absolutely ballistic for it. They make a special little trilling noise when they know that mealworms are on the way. But that is a good healthy treat for them. Now, how to present the food. How do you feed your chickens? You buy different housing, sometimes housing like the plastic housing, or some of the brands sell them with feeders. My personal preference, and this is just personal, is that I use gravity feeders. Now the gravity feeders are like this one here. There you go, this one's a 6 kilo gravity feeder. Now we sell these here in the shop. They've got little fins in there which mean that the feed comes down. So the feed is put in the top here. Okay, the feed is fed down, and you can adjust the height of those fins just by unscrewing it or screwing it up. Okay, so if you're feeding mash that flows more freely, you need to have it down a little bit tighter to control the flow, and you can loosen it off slightly for pellets. And the feed feeds down from this hopper here into the base. There's a little hat that goes on top of it, just to keep the feed dry, and also to stop the chickens perching on the top and pooing in their food. That's not very nice. They're not too bothered about that for some strange reason. Now you're hanging that up in the run, and you're hanging it up so that the feed bit here is level with the chicken's back. Okay, so they're not going to be kicking litter out of the run into it, any dirt or anything like that. So say the table is the ground, you'll be hanging it up about that high. Now mine's suspended from the roof of the run, and I've suspended it with some unbent wire coat hangers. Anthony here in the yard has got some really nice sort of just heavy duty chains with clips on the end that you can hang them up with. Or you can put them on bricks if you prefer, it's totally up to you. But so long as they're about back height, chicken back height from the ground, that's all that you need. These clean out, they wash out very easily. What I tend to do at home is I just top it up with extra feed during the week, run it down towards the end of the week, put a clean full feeder out, and then the other one gets cleaned. I tend to put all my chicken feeding equipment, dog and cat feeding equipment in the dishwasher at the end of the week with a cup full of disinfectant, and it gets steam cleaned, and it comes, these ones, they actually clean really well, comes out beautifully. So feed them from that. You'll need something this size, a hopper this size. You'll need one of those per 4 chickens that you've got in your run. So make sure one of those per 4 chickens, so that you've got enough feeding stations. They're not crowding out. There's no bullying of chickens being bullied away from the feeders. So feeding chickens, that just about sums that up. With the feed, you don't need to necessarily supplement the feed. The pellets are designed and the mash are designed to have everything in it that you need to feed your chickens to keep them healthy, all the nutrients they need to keep them healthy and laying eggs. You can, like say we give our kids a vitamin tablet in the winter to stop them getting colds. We might take one if we've got a cold coming on or something like that, one of those fizzy vitamins. You can add different things to the food and water. Now just sticking to the feed bit before we get on to water, there are different supplements which you can add. As I said, not absolutely essential, but there are health giving ones, and there are absolutely lists and lists that you can find on the internet, things that you can use. Some of the ones that we sell here are things like, we sell this organic seaweed, which is dried seaweed, freeze dried. Now that's a very good source of micronutrients for the chickens. A little bit of that mixed into the pellets before you put it in the feeder. They do love it. In fact, mine will free feed off it in a little pot. If you put a little pot in the run, they love it. But a little bit of that mixed in is full of micronutrients. It's also got a lot of chlorophyll in it because it's very green. Chlorophyll is the chemical, if you like, the natural chemical in grass and green stuff, which helps to make the chicken's egg yolks lovely deep orange. So that's got lots of chlorophyll in it. Very good to add to the feed. And things like garlic granules. People say, if you add that to the feed, will it not smell like some sort of Italian restaurant down in a chicken run? No, it won't. You don't need to add that much. Now, these are garlic granules. You can get garlic and mint, which is like an equine feed. But what that does is it's very good for deterring bugs and lice on the birds, because as you do, if you feed it to, say, put it in horse feed, which is what this is made for, or dog feed, it helps to deter lice and fleas from biting them. But it's also a very good antiviral and antibacterial. I know a lot of people take garlic capsules for colds and things like that, and that does help their general health. So you can mix a little bit of that into the feed. You really only need, say you've got a 2-litre container of feed that you're mixing up, you really only need like a tablespoon of that. You don't need much at all. It shouldn't be smelly, and it won't taint the eggs. That's what I'm always asked. So there's a lot of different things that you can add to the feed. There's a myriad of different products. They're not essential, but there are some things that we do sort of, recommend that they can be helpful. Getting onto the water, I've got a drinker here. Now, there are lots of different ways of giving water to the birds, and we've got automatic drinkers here in the pens for the chickens. The water drips down. You can use like a bunny bottle if you want to dose them with something, or you're medicating. You can hang that up in the run. The chickens quite like pecking at that because they like pecking at the little shiny ball. Chickens are actually attracted to anything shiny, and they like to peck at the little shiny ball, and you can hang that up with water in for an extra water station. Quite good for chicks as well. They learn very quickly to drink off of one of those. I use the gravity drinkers. These are absolutely fine, very easy to use. They just unscrew, fill it up with water, okay, pop the base on, screw it up, turn it over. Now turn it over really quickly as you get wet feed. Turn it over and the water filters down into the base. Now, again, I hang that up about chicken back level, about that height off the ground, so they've got plenty of fresh water every day for the chickens. So they've got plenty of fresh water, and make sure, as I said, you want about one of those per 4 hens. So make sure that you've got plenty of food and water stations, so there's no bullying. There aren't any chickens kept to the back of the pen which aren't able to eat or drink. I tend to have 2 feeding and water stations, one at one end of the pen and one at the other end, so there's plenty of room for scope for improvement, and chickens can't sort of get bullied away from it, so they've got plenty of access. Now, things which you can add to the water. Again, I said you don't necessarily need to, but there are different products that you can add to the water to benefit their health. There are things like the Nettex Vit Boost. That's a liquid poultry tonic that you can add to the water. It is full of vitamins, it's got pre and probiotics in it, it's got seaweed extract, so it's very healthy for them. And if you've got poorly chickens, say when they're molting, you can actually double the dosage without any ill effects at all. It's very positive. So that's a good one. It does help with the digestion. You've got things like Oregostim. Now, this is quite an old-fashioned oregano-based product. When you open it up and smell it, you can smell the oregano in it. Very good for chickens with digestive upsets. It helps to keep their gut in health, and I tend to put that in the water maybe once or twice a week, just to keep on top of things. If you've got stressed chickens, it's always a good help as well. And again, you've got this one here is a probiotic powder. It's very water soluble. You can add that to the water. If you've got a sick chicken, it's really helpful with stress. It helps to settle the gut, keeps the gut in good condition. So another one, you can add that to the water, or you can even make up a wet mash of pellets. If the chicken's not feeding very well, you can attract it by making up a wet mash of pellets using hot water, because that generates a smell from feed which attracts the chickens, and just mix a bit of that in. It really does help. It's got lots of minerals in it, and it's also a pre and probiotic. Well, that's all about feeding and drinking for now. Keep your chickens really healthy, keep them fed, and please don't feed them any human products. DEFRA regulations are that we're not allowed to feed them any food that's designed for human consumption. So technically speaking, no scraps from the kitchen, and certainly no Big Macs, McDonald's, Marmite on toast, spaghetti and mashed potato, because it's not good for them. Anyway, keep them healthy. Thanks very much.